Hi everybody, welcome to School of Scarlett. I'm so happy to have you here today. Today we're going to be talking about the wounded feminine. So we've talked about the masculine, we've talked about the feminine, and we've talked about the divine feminine and the divine masculine. So we're going to be talking about the wounded feminine in this video and the wounded masculine to come. So if you'd like to check those videos out, I've made a playlist and I've linked it down below in the comments and in the description. So you can check that out. So we're going to jump right into it here. We're going to get into the wounded feminine. Stay with me to the very end because I'm going to talk about really what this means for our reality, what this really means for you, and why we really need to kind of heal this wounded feminine and this wounded masculine energy in order to have a good flow of creation here on our reality. So let's get started with it here. Wounded feminine is just that. It's a feminine energy. We all contain both masculine and feminine energies within us. So it's that feminine energy, the one that's in flow, the one that's more loving, more nurturing, that energy has been wounded. So it's been wounded at some point in time. And what I generally find is that the wounding happens in childhood. And so generally it's a childhood wound. It's something that's happened within the person's childhood, and it's caused something to kind of close up and block up within them. And so this could be coming from trauma, from abuse, or simply from something as small as just being, reprimanded for something and having a reaction to it. So it can be anything, but usually it's something like trauma, abuse, somewhere where we didn't feel heard or seen, someplace where we shared a part of ourselves, a unique, authentic part of ourselves that was coming from the heart, and it got shamed or it got put down or something like that. And so when that happens, what happens is there's this kind of closure. The feminine energy, if you remember on my other videos, is an energy of receiving. It's always receiving. So while the masculine energy is giving, the feminine energy is receiving. And what happens is when the feminine energy gets wounded, let's say with something like I just mentioned, abuse, trauma, something like that, the feminine energy closes. And what happens is that there is basically like a doorway, and there's only one door in and out of this energy. And that energy or that doorway is the energy and doorway of receiving. So that door, if we can imagine that the door is open, when it's open, it's giving and receiving, okay? So it's constantly in this flow of receiving. This is where it receives, and it can also give. So it gives and receives because we both have we have all energies within us, masculine and feminine. But where I'm speaking about this today is from the feminine point of view. So we have this doorway open where we would generally receive as the feminine. Now, when we get wounded, when we have something going on with trauma or abuse, let's say that door gets slammed. Now that door is closed. And that door not only protects you, it's meant to protect you. It's meant to protect you from any more abuse, any more of anything coming in to take something. So it's protecting you, but in doing so, it closes that door of receiving. So now from there on, anytime that you enter a relationship, anytime that you enter any kind of situation where you're with another, whether or not they're actually giving to you, you're not going to be able to receive. They may be really giving and generous, but your door is closed. And so you're not receiving anything. And so you feel wounded. You misconstrue things. You see things as if someone's out to get you. There's a whole nother kind of mentality that arises from the wounded feminine. So I've made a bit of a list here with different aspects of the wounded feminine to share with you and kind of discuss here in our discussion. So, but what basically happens is that the door is closed and there's just no more receiving there. So the wounded feminine goes into the state of survival. She's no longer receiving anything, even from, let's say, she had, a husband or a provider husband or a counterpart that was providing for her in emotional ways, physical ways, or monetary ways. Whichever ways it was, now that door is closed. And so she's not receiving that. And there can even be this bit of kind of resentment, a bit of anger, a bit of frustration with the masculine, even though the masculine may be actually actively trying to give, the feminine is this kind of spun out of control. She's spun out of control into this survival state of thinking that she needs to make it happen, that she needs to fend for herself, even though maybe possibly the masculine is right there, ready to save her, ready to help her, ready to be her counterpart because the energies are actually one. But the feminine is out of control right now, is feeling as if she needs to make it happen. So this is where we see, let's take it down to maybe more practical terms. What do we see in our actual reality? This is where we see women that have basically gone into their masculine energy and kind of closed themselves off to the feminine energy. It's the wounded feminine. They're wounding, so they're closing off, so they're mostly working with the masculine energy or the brain. So basically what's happening here is you'll see these women that are overachievers. Sometimes you'll see that they present in different ways. One way is the overachiever. So in that aspect, the woman is the one that's, let's say, she's maybe moved up in her career. She's become the manager, the supervisor, the CEO of wherever she works. She's got that masculine container where she's holding a group. She's done very well. She spends a lot of time at work, analyzing, creating, doing all of these things that are more masculine based. She does this because she thinks she has to. She doesn't take time to rest or really recuperate in the ways that a typical feminine energy would need to replenish itself. So what she's doing is basically creating with what she already has. She's creating with her own energy. So she depletes her own energy. She's not really recharging it in a proper way. So these are the women that you see that are very tired, burned out, almost unhealthy, eating at fast food places a lot because they don't have time to cook, or very frazzled or losing hair, or very much talking quickly or walking quickly. And I've been in this state. I myself was in a state like this where I really felt like I had to be the provider. I had to be the one after my first marriage ended. And so I really came into this mode. And even prior to that, that had kind of kicked in because my husband was out of work for a while. So for me, I had kind of lived in this energy for quite a while. So I know what it feels like. It's a very kind of manly energy. So when I was in this state, I can kind of share a little bit from my own experiences. For one, I was the breadwinner. So meaning I was the one that was working, bringing in the money. I was also the one that was budgeting. I was also the one that knew where the money was going. I was paying the bills, knowing where everything went. So my mind was very much tied up in all of these things, where usually the feminine energy doesn't really tie up with those things. So I was the one that planned all the vacations. I was the one that planned all of the activities, with my daughter and the family and whatnot. I was the one that did the majority of work around the house. I was the one that did the majority of child rearing. I did the majority of everything. And not that I was expected to or I had to. It was this kind of overdrive that kicked in that anytime there was time to relax, I wasn't relaxing. I was doing. So that's the energy of masculine energy, very much into the doing. Now we need both, but when we're wounded, we gravitate more towards the opposite one. So in my case, it would have been the masculine energy because I present more feminine. So this kind of overdrive really takes a toll on the person's emotions, the person's physical well-being, and just overall well-being, really. You can see there's like hair loss, skin begins to change. Many things begin to indicate there's a dis-ease happening within the person. So what's going to happen is eventually the person will develop or manifest something that's going to really slow them down, whether that's a disease or it's something emotional, whether that's a breakdown, they call it a nervous breakdown or a mental breakdown, something like that. Something will be manifested to kind of slow that process down, even if it's as simple as a cold or something like that. And what that's meant to do is kind of trigger this kind of reflection or introspection into oneself to discover the wounding and bring in and call back in that feminine energy to balance. Everything's about balance. So when we look at that yin yang symbol, that black and white symbol, It's indicating balance. Everything in our existence has balance in it. It's very perfect, really. It maintains this balance in order to be what it is. What is that balance? That balance is actually the male and the masculine, the feminine energies, okay? So anyhow, when we're in this wounded state, we can get to the space of disease, of not feeling well. And so this is very typical of the wounded feminine as well. She usually has diseases. She usually has some sort of autoimmune disease that she's manifested, and usually also maybe probably a pain disorder of some kind. And because these things kind of manifest out of emotions, and so we're starting to see a lot of this, and especially in the field of psychology, that these things are actually repressed emotions that need to be released. And when that is released, the body becomes more into wholeness and can kind of clear that stuff out, whether it's pain or illness. So it's quite fascinating. So what we want to do as a wounded feminine, the wounded feminine generally wants to shy away from her emotions. She wants to disconnect. That's that masculine energy. She wants to work with the head. She wants to disconnect from the body. The feminine wants to work with the body, uses the body. That's part of her function. And so in doing this, the wounded feminine really does disconnect from her body. You'll begin to see that the wounded feminine a lot of times it doesn't love her body. Her body is something that she doesn't connect with. She sees it as something ugly or something she doesn't like, or it somehow manifested itself into looking actually not how the person wants because of all this wounding. Sometimes with the wounding, there'll be increase of weight gain, and that's just natural due to protection. Weight is a spiritual kind of symbol for protection. We put that on, even psychologically, it's talked about that that's put on as protection. If we are abused or trauma or something, it makes us feel bigger and more protected. So we'll manifest these things and we won't like it about ourselves. So that's another thing about the wounded feminine, is she's manifested things that she doesn't like about herself. And so it's creating even a larger separation there than needs to be. So it's a whole lot of really introspecting and turning back inward. The wounded feminine has she's gone away from herself. She's living more in the world. She's living more in the outside world, right? So she's more kind of outside focused. And the energy, the feminine energy, is an inner energy. So when we're talking about feminine and masculine energy is the appearance, what we see, the appearance of what we see manifesting in front of us, this chair, this table here, you know, these things are the manifestation. This is the masculine energy has been manifested now into what it is, and it's being contained to look like what it is. So what it is. The feminine energy is the one that's working within. The one that's working within to radiate out. And so that energy is a within energy. And if we think about it again in a more practical sense, in the human sense, it's basically that energy of going within, inner work. So it's basically your whole thing of inner work, therapies, you know, going to see counselors, courses, self-help books, you know, maybe YouTube videos, all of these things that are considered self-help and kind of going inward. Those are the kind of things that would be beneficial to the wounded feminine, because the wounded feminine is wounded. She has trauma. She has abuse. There is something there, a wounding, that is closing that door of reception, of receiving. So because that is closed, things, like I say, like therapy and things like that would be very beneficial. So we're always going to the opposite. So the wounded feminine is focusing more outward. So what would she have to do is the opposite, focus more inward. And when she focuses more inward, she can heal that or release anything that's there that's not meant to be there. And her outer reality begins to shift and change. That's how manifestation works. So anyhow, basically that's what's happening here. And so it would be the same for the wounded masculine. So the wounded masculine, he's actually gone more within. he's expressing more going within. And so it's more of pushing him out to work with more of the exterior, go out there and get a job, go out there and do things, go out there and actually construct things. So it's just the flip side of it. So the wounded feminine, she's got to go inward. She's got to explore herself. She's kind of got to go through that whole process of the dark night of the soul. And it's not for anything. This process is a process that's really integrated, embodied. It may seem like it's slow. You may just be wishing to have an awakening and wake up from it all. But generally, if we go through this inner work, if we go to therapy, if we do these things, they're embodied in a more lasting, more understanding way. Sometimes an awakening can be a spontaneous awakening like that can be pretty jarring, can be pretty destabilizing for a person that has had all kinds of beliefs, all kinds of things. For in one moment to everything change, sometimes that takes help. Even people that have had awakenings, a lot of times come to me, go to other people for one-on-ones, for therapies and things, for getting into their embodying and an attunement, because these energies are very powerful, very potent. So an energy like unconditional love can really, if your body's not used to that, it's like an electrical current going really fast through something that's just not meant for that. It can kind of burn it out. So we have to go at our pace. Now, whatever happens, happens. Everything's under control. But generally, I feel like a lot of people want to shy away from inner work, thinking that it's not something that they need. You don't, everything's fine. Everything's good. We don't technically need this in the sense of that reality is whole and complete right now in this moment. But we're always growing and expanding. One of the purposes of life, there is no purpose, but what happens if we really analyze life is that it's always growing and expanding. Now that's something we can see. That's something that even physics is talking about, that we are always expanding. Okay, and so that is just a natural inherent aspect of our reality. And so because of this, it would be the same for us. We're going to be expanding as well. So inner work, or, working on ourselves and realizing and awakening other parts of our consciousness. We're all the same consciousness, but there are different aspects of consciousness. We've gone through different aspects of consciousness already throughout our lives. We've been in different states of consciousness where we've realized certain things at the time, and now we realize these other things now. And so it does create different experiences for us. So we want to kind of awaken and, I would say, kind of unlock these other facets of our consciousness. So that's basically our purpose here, is kind of to awaken that. So our inner work is one way that we can do that. And it's one of the most practical ways if we align with the right practitioner, the right counselor, the right therapist. It could be very beneficial. So for the wounded feminine, I would say this is almost a must to get you back into alignment with your truth. So one of the things that I do is one-on-ones. And so prior to me ever being on YouTube, I've been a counselor for many years. And so I've worked with women specifically because I work with women and children. And so I have a lot of expertise working with women, especially women in relationships and women in the wounded energies. So if this speaks to you and you need, some partnership through this, I would recommend that you schedule one-on-one and we go through there. And so with the wounded feminine, just to kind of tie things up here, I've made a list of just some of these aspects and qualities so you can kind of see whether or not you are living through the wounded feminine energy or not. So let's see, I have a few pages here. I'm not sure if I've gotten through everything through the first page, but I'd like to go through some of these aspects here that I've written down. So one of the things is, when we go within, what you're going to find within that wounded feminine is you're going to find low self-esteem. She's going to have this kind of low self-esteem going on, low confidence. She's not going to really be able to speak for herself. She's probably going to have a lot of people-pleasing aspects where, she kind of gives in, or, she kind of compromises what she believes for others. Also, this whole kind of thing of not being able to really speak their truth. And so this wounding goes back a long time in history as well. So this wounding is not just something that this person or this expression is carrying here. This is actually something that's been kind of manifesting over time in that feminine energy for a while. Okay, so we can think about our lineage, we can think about history, and how women really hadn't had a voice until more recently. So that's still very much ingrained in the DNA and all this stuff. Of course, we can break free from that and all this, but we are still going to experience this feeling of not having a voice. So this is something very typical to most women, as a matter of fact. So the other thing I wrote down was setting boundaries, difficulty setting boundaries. So most times with the wounded feminine is she doesn't have very good boundaries. People walk all over her. She helps and she volunteers and she does this and that for others, and she's burned out and no one helps her. And it's the same story that you hear over and over again of her helping everybody else but nobody doing anything for her. So basically, she has no boundaries. When that's happening, that's basically an indication that you have no boundaries. And so there can be many other indications about that, but generally she has no boundaries in various areas of her life. She has very over-accommodating behaviors. We kind of talked about that with the people-pleasing. That's what that is. She has a very strong fear of rejection, so she wants to fit in. She'll kind of dress like everybody, be like everybody. She's kind of in this whole thing of trying to fit in. She has an inability to express her emotions. So she doesn't really express emotions. This is something that you'll kind of see. She seems a little bit blocked. It doesn't seem that she cries or expresses emotions like most feminine beings do. She has a bit of perfectionism. She's very much this kind of overachiever in that overdrive state like I talked about, okay? So these are just some of the qualities that you'll find within the wounded feminine. And so I've written some different aspects also that you will find within the wounded feminine's relationships. So within the relationships, what you're going to find in a wounded feminine is codependency. You're going to find that she's very dependent on another person. And it's not in a very healthy way. It's in a way where literally she's dependent on them. So she actually manifests and lives her life basically through others. She has no independence of her own as a wounded feminine. So that's one aspect of the wounded feminine. Not all of them are like that, but that is one aspect. And so this is someone that has pretty much lived at home with mom and dad and not really worked, but been taken care of. And then maybe gets into a marriage where now she's maybe a stay-home mom, hasn't really worked or done anything for herself in that way. So she manifests through her husband, she manifests through her family, that sort of thing. But yet it feels to her that everything is out of her reach. Like it doesn't feel like she's doing it. So she doesn't have that power. That's that codependency. She feels she needs the husband or she needs her parents in order to have anything because she's never done it without. So that's an interesting part of the wounded feminine for some wounded feminines. The other thing is just unhealthy relationship dynamics that just don't work, where maybe there's just a total mismatch there or the person's totally unseen. They're matched with someone that doesn't value or see their gifts or their light. So they're matched with someone that just doesn't see that. So maybe they had an attraction at the beginning, but a lot is going unseen there. So it's very frustrating. The wounded feminine usually has these unhealthy relationships because wounded feminines always attract a wounded masculine. To be wounded, you can only really attract the wounded. So when you're wounded like that, you're going to attract someone that's going to also have their own wounding, so they also won't be able to see. So it's an unfortunate kind of situation where neither one is seeing each other. And it's not that they're mean or don't want to, or, you know, they're trying to do this mean thing to one another. It's just a mismatch, and it happens, and it's painful. And so it's painful for a lot of people. They'll stay in marriages and try to see about this. But a lot of times it's so mismatched that it really is just not going to work. The energies are so far apart that they're not coming together quick enough for there to be any kind of relief. And this is where you'll see that people will move on. And there's nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with that. I've seen where a lot of people have moved on and they reconnect with others and things like that. And this just continues on. And then even then, they might decide or feel like that's no longer serving them, and they'll leave that, and it's always evolving and expanding into more. And what I begin to notice with some of these people is that they are actually expanding into more of themselves. It's always that way. They're finding partners that are more matched and more aligned to who they truly are. As before, it was an unhealthy kind of mismatched relationship. So you'll find mismatched relationships with the wounded feminine. And in the relationships, you'll also find that there's this kind of difficulty in communication. Neither one is communicating clearly. They can't seem to get on the same page. That seems to be also a very recurrent theme. And then there's this fear of abandonment. And it could be very well that the wounding came from abandonment, from maybe a father that had left the home, or maybe they were adopted, or maybe there was a wounding where one of their early relationships left them. Something like that can trigger this wounding for either the feminine or the masculine. So the next thing would be a lack of assertiveness. You're going to find that there is like this lack of assertiveness within the wounded feminine. She's not very assertive when it comes to her emotions. She might be assertive in the workplace with certain things, but she's not assertive of her own needs within a relationship. Now we're talking within a relationship, because you'll notice that the wounded feminine a lot of times will do very well at work. But in the relationship, her needs are not being met. Her emotional needs are not being met. She oftentimes finds people that are emotionally unavailable, things like that. Her physical needs are not being met in the relationship. There's just not that physicality, that magnetism, because with a wounded feminine, she can't produce magnetism, because without receiving, because she has that door closed, without receiving, there's no magnetism. The only way you can have magnetism, which is that passion that you need for that physical relationship, is to have that door open, because the masculine gives and the feminine receives. And if that door is closed, nothing's getting in or out. So that's kind of that hard part there. But let's see what else. So I wrote down that she also tolerates disrespect within a relationship. Either this is because she feels that she can't do any better, or she feels that she'll never find someone else. There's always a fear-based kind of comment or thought behind it. So that's something else that you will find with the wounded feminine. And so the other thing that I wrote on here within relationships is that you'll find that she's always seeking validation from the masculine, or from whoever is that she's in the relationship with. So she's always seeking validation from them, and she hasn't learned yet that the validation, usually the validation comes from within, from yourself. So she hasn't learned that lesson yet. Okay, so now I wrote down some of the things that could be causes, some of the things that could be contributing to it. Not so much causes, but I guess I would say contributing to these energies existing in the first place. So that would be dependency on the male, like these traditional gender roles and things like this. Sometimes they create this wounded energy when we don't allow the feminine to truly develop herself as an individual, independent, I guess I would say. Independent in the way that she knows how to follow her heart. She knows that she can do this life on her own or with someone. It's kind of creating that self-love and self-confidence within herself. If she hasn't developed that, then that's going to create this wounded feminine, because she's always going to feel innately down inside that she can't trust herself, that she doesn't know if she can do this, because she's never done it. She's never really had a job, or she's never really lived on her own, or she's never really asserted herself, or she's never really gone into her feelings or emotions. So she really doesn't trust herself. So one of the things about the traditional gender roles is that a lot of times they foster this, because if we don't encourage, let's say, the feminine in that relationship to do things, to be independent, she becomes very dependent on that masculine energy that's bringing in and providing everything for her. A lot of times she becomes very comfortable with this and even depends on him for her emotional well-being, and it can snowball into basically depending on him for everything. And so this can be quite destabilizing to the feminine, and basically throw her into a wounded state anytime she feels insecure with her masculine. So this is kind of that scary part about it. So let's see what else. I wrote down childhood experiences, and we talked about that. That can cause some of this wounding to happen. Cultural expectations. Sometimes that's kind of with the gender roles and stuff like that. What's expected. Sometimes maybe there's cultures where really women and the feminine cannot and will not be allowed to do certain things. And so her wounding can kind of come from that as well. Just feeling powerless, feeling like in this culture she has no way to do anything. So unhealthy relationships, we talked about that, negative self-beliefs, and family programming. These things all kind of contribute to the wounding continuing, because a lot of times, like I say, the wounding really did come from childhood. And so it just kind of gets perpetuated, and it's this kind of snowball effect where the wounding becomes very large. That snowball gets bigger and bigger and bigger as things happen for the feminine, because really the wounded feminine is really only attracting more wounding, because she's attracting what she is. We really only attract what we are, what we're doing, what we're expressing. So it's just kind of this hard situation that the wounded feminine is in. And so to turn that around, essentially the biggest hack I could give you is to turn within yourself and begin to follow your heart, and your heart will begin to lead you in your way. So for me, this kind of happened slowly. I didn't realize anything about feminine and masculine energies within myself. Now, like I say, I did a lot of counseling. I talked to a lot of people about things. Now, I didn't talk about it in the terms of masculine and feminine energy. I talked about it in terms of relationships, in terms of the person. But of course, this is what we were talking about, was these energies. So over time, I noticed some things about myself that were quite interesting about this character. And so as I began to learn this character's personality and the different quirks and things about this character, I began to notice those things about how, there was just kind of this sense of sometimes going into autopilot, sometimes going too quickly, sometimes not feeling connected to the person I'm with, sometimes not feeling very feminine or beautiful in a sense, I guess. And so basically, this was just something that I felt more manly, I guess you could say. And so this was apparent to me at some point, and I began to do small things like, just begin to try some things that I used to enjoy that used to be more feminine, like dancing. I'm not a great singer, but I tried singing, and some of these things that are more feminine that way. I tried a little bit more cooking, more gardening. I started to connect with all these aspects of myself that I actually did enjoy. I do enjoy doing those things. I enjoyed doing those things as a child. I still enjoy doing them now, but I disconnected so much from them in that time period that I was in that survival mode of working, and really trying to kind of up level myself and my family in different ways. So when my focus was really masculine like that, I wasn't very much connected to these things. Now that I've kind of noticed the power of really getting back into the feminine energy, it's actually a much more powerful energy. It's an energy that actually gets more done quicker, and you wouldn't think it, because this energy allows you to just relax, read your book, take a long bath, really, do your makeup, do your hair, take your time. This energy allows you a lot of leisure time, a lot of relaxation, a lot of play time to do the things that you genuinely want to do. And so you would think this energy is going to basically lead you down the wrong road. You're never going to get anything done. But amazingly, this energy, it basically energizes you, invigorates you, and gives you so much energy that you're able to do more within one day that you ever were able to do. And so it's pretty amazing. And sometimes even if you don't want to do anything, if you just continue on with your reading or exploring nature, you begin to have insights and downloads and things that you would have never had with your brain tied up in all of these kind of analytical things that you were in before. And I know this for myself, because I know now when I get into this flow of playing or walking or being in nature, doing whatever it happens to be, magic happens. The universe begins to speak. And so it's quite amazing. And so I would really encourage you as a feminine or as a masculine to really heal that feminine wounding, because even if you are a masculine, you still have that feminine energy within you. The feminine energy is your intuition, is your heart. It has this knowledge that the brain could never have. So to align with that, you're going to want to kind of go into that wounding and really feel it out and go through it so that you can start to live through your heart. And so I basically want to just kind of tie everything up here and just say that our whole existence here is all about balance. It's all about maintaining these balances. And one of those is that feminine and masculine energy. So to do so, like I mentioned before, there's no shame or issue with getting inner work. It's actually one of the most valuable things that you could do with your time here. So I really encourage you, if you want to realign with your heart, I offer quite a few different options. I have the unconditional course, and that's a course that reorients you to your heart. And right now it's on an early bird special. And if you're watching this on Thanksgiving week, we also have a Black Friday. All you have to do is enter the code Black Friday and you can get a discount on the unconditional course. So that's available to you. I also offer one-on-one sessions. Now you can do that through me, or you can do this through a therapist or anybody that you have in your area. And so, you know, I do them through Zoom, but you know, if you want somebody in person, or if you want to do whatever you want to do, you want to trust yourself with whatever choice you do. And as you go through your inner work, really just trust yourself through that process. Go more and more within, and that is how you will heal that feminine energy, is going within. So that's really all I wanted to kind of share with you today, is give you a good description of what this is. And once you've identified it, go within, and that's where you'll find the healing that you need. So I really encourage you to heal that wounded energy, because there's so much magic within the feminine that you will have, so much magnetism and beauty that you will attract through the feminine energy. Our feminine aspects are the most beautiful, radiant aspects, in my opinion. So it's where you'll find beauty. It's where you'll find love. It's where you'll find unconditional love. So I encourage you in this moment to choose your heart and begin the journey of healing any wounding that you may find there. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, share this content with others, get this out there. Comment down below. That helps the algorithm and gets everything going. So thank you so much again for your support, and thank you for watching.